The ship fell out of FTL with the grace of a wounded animal, tumbling end over end before its stabilizers finally caught and leveled the descent. On the bridge of the ISS Vindication, the silence was absolute, broken only by the soft, rhythmic beeping of diagnostic consoles. Captain Elias Vance stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the azure and emerald globe that now filled the main viewport. Earth. Home. It looked so peaceful from up here, a swirling marble of life in the vast, indifferent dark. But he knew the truth. Peace was a memory. "Damage report," he said, his voice calm, a stark contrast to the tension coiling in his gut. Lieutenant Commander Sato, his communications and tactical officer, didn't look up from her console. "Hull integrity at 68%. We lost the forward sensor array and portside point defense cannons. Casualties, 12 injured, 3 critical. Engineering is working on the FTL drive, but it'll be days before we can even think about another jump." Vance nodded slowly. They had been lucky. The patrol had stumbled upon a Varnak scouting fleet at the edge of the Sol system. The Varnak, an avian species with a rigid, millennia-old empire, had been expanding across the galactic arm, absorbing or eradicating any species that resisted their offer of integration. Their doctrine was simple and had never failed. Appear with overwhelming force, demonstrate your technological superiority, and demand submission. The weaker species, faced with annihilation, always capitulated. Until now. The Varnak admiral, on a creature named Cathar, whose plumage was the deep crimson of dried blood, had been particularly arrogant. His message, still echoing in the bridge's comm logs, was a masterpiece of condescending ultimatums. "Primitives of the Sol system. Your species has reached a critical juncture. Your petty wars and tribal conflicts end now. You will disarm all planetary and orbital defenses. You will accept Varnak governors on every major population center. You will provide resources and labor to the glory of the Star Empire. Resist, and your world will be rendered barren. You have one of your primitive hours to comply." Vance had listened, his expression unchanging. He had then opened a channel and given a single 4-word reply that would be etched into human history. "We decline your offer." Cathar's screech of incredulous rage had been deeply satisfying. The Varnak admiral had clearly expected fear, perhaps even gratitude. He hadn't expected defiance. The battle that followed was short and brutal. The Varnak scouts, sleek and advanced, were faster and more maneuverable. But the human ships, built with a rugged, almost crude practicality, were tougher. They absorbed punishment that would have shattered a Varnak vessel and kept fighting. The Vindication had taken heavy damage, but it had also managed to land a solid hit on the lead Varnak ship with a spinal-mounted mass driver, a weapon the Varnak considered laughably primitive. It had punched clean through their advanced shields and gutted the vessel. The Varnak fleet, expecting an easy victory, had instead found a hornet's nest. And they had withdrawn to regroup, and the Vindication had limped home. "Get me the Joint Chiefs," Vance ordered, "and patch in the Secretary General. They need to know what's coming." The following days were a blur of activity. The Varnak ultimatum and Earth's response had galvanized humanity in a way not seen since the World Wars. The initial fear, the cold dread of facing a star-spanning empire, was quickly transmuted into a fierce, burning resolve. This was not a war for resources or ideology. This was a war for existence. In underground bunkers and orbital shipyards, the gears of war began to turn. Every nation on Earth, every corporation, every individual contributed. Old satellites were dragged out of graveyard orbits and fitted with nuclear warheads. Merchant vessels were hastily armed. The International Space Force, once a small, underfunded organization for system patrol, became the nucleus of humanity's last stand. General Marcus Thorne, a weathered veteran of countless planetary conflicts, addressed the assembled commanders. His face, projected on screens across the globe, was etched with grim determination. "The Varnak are coming. They are more advanced than us. They have faster ships, better shields, and more firepower. But they have one critical weakness." He paused, letting the silence hang. "They have never faced an enemy who would rather die fighting than live on their knees. They do not understand us. They see our primitive weapons and our short, violent history as signs of a savage, doomed species. They are wrong. It is our greatest strength." He tapped a control, and the display behind him showed a star chart. A single, blinking red dot marked the edge of the system. "The Varnak fleet will be here in 3 weeks. They will not send scouts this time. They will send their full might. They expect to find a terrified, fractured species begging for mercy. We are going to show them something else. We are going to show them hell." The plan was audacious, born of desperation and a uniquely human talent for asymmetric warfare. They couldn't match the Varnak in a straight fight, so they wouldn't fight one. Phase 1 involved converting thousands of asteroids into kinetic kill vehicles. Simple, unpowered, and nearly undetectable, they would be seeded along the Varnak's most likely approach vector. A rock is just a rock until it hits you at a significant fraction of the speed of light. Phase 2 was the Ghost Fleet. Every ship, from system patrol boats to civilian tugs, would be fitted with powerful jamming and sensor decoy equipment. They would create 1,000 false images of human warships, making it impossible for the Varnak to know where the real threat was. Phase 3 was the most dangerous. A squadron of the fastest, most maneuverable ships they had, crewed entirely by volunteers, would act as the bait. They would lure the main Varnak battle group into the asteroid field, then break for the Oort cloud, drawing the enemy away from Earth and into a chase across the outer system. And finally, if all else failed, there was the Prometheus option. Every major city on Earth had been equipped with ground-to-space missile silos, their warheads not nuclear, but pure fusion devices designed to create massive electromagnetic pulses. If the Varnak made it to orbit, they would be met by a wall of fire that would fry their delicate electronics. It would also cripple Earth's own infrastructure for a generation, but it was a price every human was willing to pay. The 3 weeks passed in a heartbeat. Every human on Earth, from the frozen tundras of Siberia to the sun-baked plains of Africa, looked to the sky. They knew. They felt it. Then, the alarms blared. The Varnak fleet had dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system. It was enormous. Dozens of capital ships, bristling with weapons, flanked by hundreds of smaller escort vessels. At its heart was the Dreadnought, the Varnak flagship, a city-sized behemoth called the Imperator's Talon. It was a display of power designed to crush all hope. Cathar, now commanding the entire invasion fleet, surveyed the system with a mixture of contempt and irritation. The primitive world hung before him, defenseless. His sensors showed a pathetic collection of ships huddled near the third planet. He expected the usual message of surrender to arrive at any moment. Instead, a single, weak transmission was picked up. It was visual. It showed a human Captain Vance, standing on the bridge of his scarred ship. His face was calm, his eyes hard. He didn't speak. He simply raised his hand and, with a slow, deliberate motion, drew his thumb across his own throat. The transmission ended. Cathar's feathers ruffled in confusion, then anger. What savage ritual was this? He gave the order. "Move to attack position. Prepare to bombard the primary population centers. I want this world pacified by nightfall." The Varnak fleet surged forward. A tidal wave of metal and fire. They were confident, their formation perfect, their strategy honed over 1,000 conquered worlds. They accelerated towards Earth, their sensors scanning for the primitive human ships that had dared to defy them. They never saw the rocks. The first wave of asteroids, moving on silent ballistic trajectories, slammed into the Varnak formation. A cruiser, its shields focused forward for the anticipated battle, was struck amidships by a kilometer-wide rock. The shields flared and died, and the rock, with the force of 1,000 nuclear bombs, tore the ship in two. Confusion reigned. Ships scattered, colliding with each other as they tried to evade an invisible enemy. The perfect Varnak formation shattered into chaos. "What is this?" Cathar screeched, gripping his command perch as his ship shuddered from a near miss. "From where are they attacking?" "It's debris, Admiral. Unpowered asteroids. Our sensors can't track them all," a tactical officer cried out. While the Varnak were reeling, the Ghost Fleet activated. Suddenly, Cathar's tactical display, which had shown a handful of ships, was flooded with thousands of new contacts. They flickered, disappeared, and reappeared in different locations. Human ships seemed to be everywhere. "It's a trick!" the tactical officer yelled. "They are false signals, jamming." "Then find me the real ones," Cathar screamed, his composure finally cracking. And then the bait appeared. A small squadron of the fastest human ships, led by the Vindication, darted out from behind the moon, firing their pathetic weapons at the edge of the Varnak fleet. The shots were ineffective, but the insult was immense. They were taunting them. "Admiral, the human flagship, it is the one that escaped before. It is challenging us." Cathar saw his chance. Destroy the leader, break their spirit. All ships, ignore the ghosts, pursue that vessel. Bring me its captain's head. The Varnak fleet, bloodied and confused, eagerly fell for the trap. They broke formation and surged after the small human squadron, which immediately turned and fled, not towards Earth, but away from it, towards the cold, dark expanse of the outer system. The chase was on. The human ships, though slower in a straight line, were incredibly agile. They weaved and dodged through the sparse outer system, leading the lumbering Varnak warships on a wild goose chase. The Varnak, focused on their prey, I never noticed they were being led directly towards a particularly dense region of the Oort cloud, a vast shell of icy planetesimals. Meanwhile, the rest of humanity's improvised fleet, the real one, was moving. They didn't go after the main Varnak force. They went after the stragglers, the damaged ships that had fallen behind. Using swarming tactics, they would surround a lone Varnak cruiser, overwhelming its point defenses with massed missile fire before closing in to board or destroy it. They learned the Varnak's weaknesses. Their ships were designed for standoff battles, not close-quarters brawls. Their crews, conditioned by centuries of easy conquest, panicked when faced with an enemy that refused to die. In the Oort cloud, the Vindication squadron finally ran out of room to flee. They turned to face the oncoming Varnak fleet. He now strung out and disorganized from the long chase. Captain Vance looked at the faces of his crew. They were exhausted, scared, but resolute. "We have done our job," he said over the ship-wide comm. "We led them here. Now we make our stand. For Earth." The Varnak ships, expecting a final, desperate fight, were confused when the human ships didn't fire. They just hung there, silent, in the middle of a vast field of icy rocks. Cathar, his rage now a cold, hard thing, gave the order. "Destroy them!" But before his gunners could fire, the universe turned white, humanity's final trick. The Oort cloud was full of ice, and ice, when subjected to a focused energy beam, flashes into superheated steam. The human ships had been silently seeding the area with powerful short-range lasers. When the Varnak fleet was fully inside the cloud, they activated them all at once, targeting the nearest comets. The resulting explosions of superheated plasma weren't powerful enough to destroy the Varnak ships, but they blinded them. Every optical sensor, every viewport, was seared by the intense light. For a precious few seconds, the Varnak fleet was blind. In that moment of blindness, the human ships didn't fire. They accelerated, straight at the Varnak fleet. They flew right through the formation, so close they could see the terrified faces of the avian aliens staring out from their viewports. They launched everything they had, boarding pods packed with human marines, latched onto the hulls of the larger Varnak ships. They cut their way inside, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the inside of a Varnak warship echoed with the sound of close-quarters combat, and a style of warfare so brutal and primitive it had been forgotten by the galaxy. On the bridge of the Imperator's Talon, Cathar watched in horror as his invincible fleet dissolved into a chaotic melee. His screens showed his ships not exploding, but being taken, boarded, conquered by primitives. A massive impact shook the dreadnought. The Vindication, its weapons long since exhausted, had rammed itself into the flagship's landing bay. The hull breached, and a flood of humanity poured in. They fought with a ferocity the Varnak had never imagined. They used their rifles, their sidearms, their combat knives, and when those were gone, their bare hands. Cathar, surrounded by his elite guard, saw the bridge doors explode inward. A group of humans, led by a man with a scarred face and eyes that held the fire of a dying star, and stepped through the smoke. It was Vance. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his uniform torn, but he stood tall. Cathar drew himself up, trying to find the last shreds of his imperial dignity. "You are savages," he hissed. "You fight without honor. This changes nothing. The Empire will send more ships. They will burn your world to ashes." Vance looked at the alien admiral, this creature of 1,000 conquered worlds, who could not comprehend a species that chose death over submission. He didn't bother to reply. There was nothing to say. He simply raised his sidearm and fired. The Battle of Sol was over. The Varnak invasion fleet was destroyed, captured, or scattered. Humanity had paid a terrible price. The Vindication was lost. Thousands of ships were gone. Millions were dead. But Earth lived. In the following months, humanity reverse-engineered the captured Varnak technology. They learned their language, their history, their politics. They learned about the Star Empire, a stagnant, cruel regime that had ruled through fear for 10,000 years. And they learned its greatest secret. Fear was all it had. Its power was a bluff, a myth perpetuated by the very terror it inspired. Humanity didn't build a fleet to conquer. They built a fleet to deliver a message. They sent a single ship, crewed by volunteers, to the Varnak home world. It carried no weapons. It carried a simple, looping transmission, translated into every Varnak dialect. It showed images of Earth, its cities, its oceans, its people. It showed the battle, the courage, the sacrifice. And it ended with a message from General Thorne, now the first leader of the United Earth Federation. "You came to our world demanding submission. You offered us a choice, surrender or die. We chose a third option. We chose to fight. We showed you that some things are worth more than survival. We are not a threat to your empire. We are its end. Not because we will conquer you, but because we have shown your people that you can be beaten, that your power is not absolute. The seed of doubt has been planted. It will grow. It will spread. And one day your empire will fall, not to our ships, but to the hope of freedom in the hearts of your own people. We will not come to your world. We will wait, and we will watch." The transmission ended. On 1,000 Varnak worlds, in the hearts of 1 billion beings who had never known anything but the iron fist of the Empire, a single terrifying and exhilarating thought took root. And the invincible had been made vulnerable, the masters had been defied, and they had lost. The Star Empire demanded submission, humanity chose war, and in doing so, they changed the galaxy forever.